Think about this. Here's the Israelites. They're coming into the land of Canaan. Ostensibly, God has told them that it's yours. You're going to conquer, drive out all the inhabitants of it, as wicked as they were. And after 7 days of marching around the city, of course, they blew the trumpet and yelled and screamed, and the city fell down on itself. Hey, welcome to Church for Skeptics. Dan Arsenal here. Bart Ehrman, was a textual critic. And I think, once you get outside of your own field, your field of expertise, you become a student, just like me. And we're all like the same. So he has become, from textual criticism, he became a historian on his view, I guess, or he's done a lot of historical research, so-called. And now he's an archaeologist as well. And so he has a list of archaeological, not discoveries, but archaeologists' non-evidence for things in the Bible. And I'm kind of picking on them. One of them has to do with the destruction of Jericho. So, we're all the same. We tend to pick our teachers based on what we hope they say. We give him per evidence is he's going to find out. We did this earlier, but just as an example. So Bart Ehrman's going to talk about Mark chapter 2. Did Jesus really claim to be God? Well, he already thinks Jesus didn't claim to be God, so he's picked E.P. Sanders as his theologian, his scholar, to give evidence against that. It's just, we all tend to do that, but it seems so obvious in his case. So with the evidence and the historical accuracy of the Bible. So what I want to talk about today, if you have a preconceived notion, this is for all of us. I think the flood happened, so I'm looking for evidence that it did. I think there was an exodus from Egypt, and so we're looking for evidence that it did. I think that the Israelites destroyed the city of Jericho, their first battle, by the way, as they entered Canaan. And so I find evidence that way. But on Bart Ehrman, there is no evidence for the Israelites destroying the city of Jericho. So I'm going to tell you why that is a little bit, and just give you a few things that pretty much everybody agrees on, and why I think it's the real deal. So here we go. Here's what was found in the ruins of Jericho. By the way, nobody discredits that they found Jericho. It's a different name today. It's called es-Sultan. Tel means it's a mound, it's a hill. And so Jericho was built on a hill. It's west of the Jordan River, just like the Bible would say. It's now in the West Bank, by the way. And it's a Bronze Age city. And here's what Joshua says about it. Joshua says that Jericho is a highly fortified city. Think about this. Here's the Israelites. They're coming into the land of Canaan. Ostensibly, God has told them that it's yours. You're going to conquer, drive out all the inhabitants of it, as wicked as they were. And that's another video, too. But now they come to Jericho. It's a highly fortified city. Well, let me tell you how fortified it is. This is based on archaeological evidence. 1950s British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon, and she didn't think that she knew that the walls had fallen down. The wall did come tumbling down, but they think it was an earthquake, and they don't think it was during the time of the conquest. It had to have been earlier, and I'll tell you why they think that and why I think it's bogus. So a lot of that has changed since the 1950s. They've kept going back, and they've found in the 1980s and the 1990s. Lately, 1997, they found more and more evidence that times it to the time of the conquest. But the point that I want to make is that it's definitely was a fortified city. Think about this. You have it's on a hill, so it's up on top of a hill, and there are 20 feet tall walls on top of the hill. Well, down the embankment, there's another wall here about 15 feet. I think it was 12 to 15 feet tall. So to get into the city, You had to climb up in a bay. You can't get over the first wall. You can't, if you did, you got to have to go another embankment and get over the 20-foot wall. And some of these walls are so thick, they had houses in them, in the walls. They were built into the walls. So it's definitely a fortified city. Now, let me tell you a couple of other things that this is no doubt, this is what they found. I'll give you a little introductory lesson about sieging. Not that I have ever been in one, but they tell me that the time of the siege, when empires or armies tried to besiege a city, they tried to do it before the harvest time, and that makes a lot of sense. Because if the fields surrounding the city are full of grain, then the marauding soldiers have something to eat. And the people inside, they haven't done the harvest yet, and so they don't have anything to eat. Now, in the case of Jericho, all that's different. They have actually found in the city of Jericho, archaeologists have found a lot of grain still there. Now it's burnt, some of it's burnt, but it's still there. That means they have already had their harvest. Well, that's exactly what Joshua says. It was harvest time, after harvest time, when they crossed the Jordan. And the first thing they encountered, of course, was Jericho. The second thing is this. If Jericho was indeed, or they already had their harvest in, they also had a spring water inside the city. So they would have had food and water for a long, long time. And usually what happens in a situation like that is the besieging army gets tired of it and they're done. They leave because they have to go find food for themselves. In this case, Joshua says it only took 7 days. And after 7 days of marching around the city, of course, they blew the trumpet and yelled and screamed, and the city fell down on itself. Well, guess what? That's exactly what the walls tell us in archaeology, that they fell down upon themselves. And it looks like that when they fell, the top fell down and then it rolled all the bricks. And what Kathleen Kenyon, who's a British archaeologist, of course, she's not a believer, but she said they were kind of rolled down and then topple some of the lower walls. And so basically it made a ramp of people so they could walk straight up into the city. They had a long way walk up, but that's exactly, again, what Joshua said. They went straight up into the city. There's another neat thing about Jericho. Joshua says that there was one person in the city, Rahab, who had protected the spies when they went and scouted the city there before they went in, and they promised her protection. Well, guess what? In a lot of the rooms, a lot of the homes in Jericho were built into the walls. That's how the spies got out, by the way. They went the back way out across the wall. She let them off the wall, and they made their way into the hills and hid for a while, and then they went back home. There was one house in that wall that has fallen. Archaeologically, there's a small section that was preserved. It was still standing. Well, it didn't have Rahab's name and address on it, but I think it's a pretty good guess, and I think that's pretty neat. So you've got the grains, you've got the timing, the harvest time, which is different. You've got the fall down of the walls falling down and allowing people to come over them. And now here's the problem. Everybody knows that. Even Kenyon knew that. But here's the problem. Carbon-14 dating dates most of the rocks there. And they date them about a little less than 200 years earlier than the conquest would have been. So just to get your bearings, the conquest, most people would say, there are some doubts about this too, about the dating, but most people would say the conquest of Israel into Canaan, if it happened, was about 1400 BC. Well, the carbon dating dates it to about 1590 actually, 1590 BC. Well, here's the thing about carbon-14 dating. almost inevitably, I did a lot of research on this to find out what other archaeologists are saying, and almost inevitably, when you go to these ancient sites, whether it's Jericho or any other, if they do carbon-14 dating, the dating almost inevitably from carbon-14 is about 200 years earlier than the rest of the historical evidence would say. And so why are those discrepancies? Well, there's a lot of reasons for it. But anyway, most archaeologists prefer the historical dating rather than the carbon-14 dating. They're not that far apart, but they want to pinpoint this as much as possible. Well, let me tell you something that they did find in Jericho. That this is, all you got to do is Google it. They found a big number of what they call scarabs. Now, scarab is basically a name for a beetle, and they look like beetles. So they are amulets and discs and bracelets and rings that they're made in the shape of a beetle. Well, in Jericho, they found a number of them, and all of them, virtually all of them, were made in homage to Egyptian royalties. And so you can date the scarabs based on the Egyptian pharaohs. And so, interestingly enough, some of the scarabs, not too many of them, I don't think, were in honor of a female pharaoh. Her name was Hatshepsut. I think I said that right. However you pronounce it, Hatshepsut. She was a female pharaoh. You know, the last pharaoh of Egypt was also a female. Her name was Cleopatra. So anyway, they found these, and then they found her successor was the pharaoh Thutmose III, and they have a bunch of scarabs in Jericho. How did they get there? Well, somebody brought them there. They were made. Most of them would have been made. They were Canaanites. They weren't Egyptians. They weren't worshiping the Egyptian gods. And so they were back and forth from Egypt to Canaan. They had commerce. And so Thutmose III has a lot of scarabs there. But the last one, the one that is the latest, was for the pharaoh named Amenhotep III. Amenhotep III. And the thing is, there aren't scarabs after him. Well, what does that tell us? It tells us that when Jericho fell, when Jericho was destroyed, that he would have been the reigning pharaoh in Egypt. So you have a correlation there. Guess when his reign was? It was from 1400 AD. It's the same as the conquest. And so when you put those together, Jericho was probably built as a Bronze Age city about 1700 BC. It was destroyed, according to the evidence other than carbon-14 dating. It was destroyed in about 1400 BC, which is exactly timed with, and Jericho says, Joshua says all that. It's harvest time, so that's why the barley would be in the city and not out in the fields. That's why the scarabs would identify Amenhotep III as being the current Egyptian pharaoh at the time. There are a lot of great reasons to think that this is exactly what happened as Joshua and Judges and 1 Kings and some of the other books of the Bible. If you just put their verses together and do the math, this is what you come up with. And I think archaeology bears it out. So that's interesting to me. I hope it's interesting to you. I love history. And so God has given us so much archaeological evidence that the Bible is true. Old Testament and New Testament. I was surprised, and I'm going forward here, I was surprised how much archaeological evidence is for the details of the New Testament as well. And so we'll talk about that going forward. Thanks for watching. I hope this is interesting to you. We'll see you next time.